The child's scream was loud enough to shatter starlight, yet in the gleaming high-tech corridors of the Zenith Institute on Chrysolith 9, almost no one cared enough to stop it. Hidden away on the 13th level, behind security protocols deadly enough to kill unauthorized visitors, lay Pearl Valtheri Nithya. She was small, frail, and possessed the lavender skin of royalty, but her life was a never-ending nightmare of agony that no medical scanner could explain. For 7 years, the greatest minds in the Valtheri Dominion had failed her. They believed she was broken, perhaps even insane. But Pearl wasn't sick. In fact, according to the most advanced medical scanners in the world, she is physically perfect. Yet she screams for 18 hours a day. She screams because she has a secret condition. It felt like a curse. She could feel the emotions of every living being around her as physical torture. The doctor's arrogance felt like needles. The nurse's bitterness burned like acid. But then a man named Silas Vexthar walked into her room. He wasn't a famous doctor or a powerful politician. He was just a human orderly, a janitor with graying hair and a tragic past. But the moment he stepped through those doors, the impossible happened. For the first time in her life, Pearl stopped screaming. Because in a galaxy filled with noise and pain, Silas was the only one who was quiet. And the reason why he didn't hurt her is a story that will change the way you look at power and grief forever. Before we dive into the story of how a simple human orderly healed a galactic princess when no one else could, make sure to smash that subscribe button. Tomorrow we have an extra special story coming up that is going to blow your mind, and you do not want to miss it. Help me reach a larger audience by liking and sharing this video. It really supports the channel. I'd love to know, where are you watching this story from? Let me know in the comments below, and if you have suggestions for the next story you want to hear, drop them there too. The Zenith Institute on Chrysolith 9 was not just a hospital. It was a monument to the Valtheri Dominion's obsession with perfection. Stretching across 12 crystalline levels, the building hummed with technology capable of rebuilding bodies at a molecular level and curing diseases that had plagued civilizations for millennia. The walls themselves were bioluminescent, pulsing with the planet's magnetic heartbeat, casting dancing shadows across floors polished to a mirror brightness. Here, beings from 17 different star systems came to be fixed, their ailments ranging from simple fractures to cosmic radiation poisoning that turned flesh into liquid light. But there was a 13th level. Hidden behind security protocols lethal enough to vaporize unauthorized visitors, a single room held a darkness that no technology could illuminate. In the center of a suspension field, Pearl Valtheri Nithya lay curled in a tight ball. She was small, her body trembling with an agony that had no physical source. Her vitals were perfect. Her organs functioned flawlessly. Yet Pearl screamed. She was 9 years old, though she looked much younger, her growth stunted by years of relentless suffering. Her skin bore the lavender hue typical of Valtheri royalty, but where her people usually glowed with an inner radiance, Pearl appeared dim, as if the life force had been drained right out of her essence. Silver hair fell in tangled waves around a face that should have been beautiful but was instead twisted in perpetual anguish. When she opened her eyes, they held the violet depth of nebulas, but swimming within that cosmic color was a terror so profound it seemed impossible for such a small being to contain it. The medical staff had given up trying to understand her condition 7 years ago. They had run every test known to Valtheri science and consulted specialists from 14 different species. They had subjected her to procedures that would have killed most beings 3 times over, yet nothing helped. So the princess screamed, and the galaxy shrugged and moved on. Outside the observation window, Nurse Zyrus Valtheri stood watching, her crystalline features reflecting the harsh light of the monitoring station. She had been assigned to Pearl's care for 3 cycles now, and the bitterness in her expression had grown sharper with every passing day. Another episode, she muttered to her colleague, Dr. Ishmael Javeth, who was reviewing the latest brain scans with clinical detachment. 37 minutes. This time she is getting worse. Dr. Ishmael's insectoid form remained absolutely still, save for the constant twitching motion of his visual processing units. Or she is simply learning to perform for a longer duration, he suggested, his voice devoid of warmth. I have reviewed the historical data extensively. There is no physiological explanation for her reported pain. The scans show normal neural activity, normal pain receptor function, normal everything. Then what do you propose we tell the Director Prime? Zyrus asked, her voice carrying the sharp edge of someone whose patience had been ground to dust. The truth, Ishmael replied. The child suffers from psychological delusions, possibly attention-seeking behavior developed from inadequate early boundaries. The solution is psychiatric intervention, not continued indulgence of her theatrical displays. Inside the chamber, Pearl's screams had subsided to broken sobs. She pressed her hands against her skull, as if trying to hold together something that was fracturing from within. The suspension field kept her floating 30 centimeters above the floor, preventing the self-harm that had been a problem in earlier years when she would claw at her own skin, trying to escape a pain that had no external source. "Please," she whispered, her voice raw. "Please make them leave. They hurt so much. Their thoughts hurt. Their anger hurts. Everything about them hurts." But the observation room was soundproofed, and even if it hadn't been, Cyrus and Ishmael would not have adjusted their behavior. They had heard these pleas 1,000 times. To them, it wasn't communication. It was just a symptom of a disorder they couldn't diagnose and therefore dismissed as a lie. What they didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that Pearl was telling the precise truth. She could feel the emotional signatures of every being within 30 meters of her position. More than feel them, she experienced them as physical sensations that her nervous system interpreted as pain. Dr. Ishmael's clinical irritation manifested as needles pressing into her temples. Nurse Cyrus's bitter resentment felt like acid burning along her spine. Even the security guard stationed outside her door, who hated his assignment to babysit a crazy princess, created a sensation like ground glass in her lungs with every breath. The closer someone came and the more intense their emotional state, the more she suffered. In a healing center filled with stressed medical personnel, ambitious politicians, and guards radiating aggressive readiness, Pearl existed in constant torment. Even her mother, Director Prime Estella Valtheri Kale, was a source of agony. Estella had visited twice in the past month, and each time, Pearl had begged her to leave before she even entered the room. The weight of imperial responsibility, the cold calculation required to rule, and the ruthless decisiveness that kept Estella in power crashed into Pearl's consciousness like a tsunami of razor blades. The Director Prime's love for her daughter was genuine, but it was buried under so many layers of political necessity and emotional armor that Pearl could barely sense it through the overwhelming pain. "I am sorry, my heart," Estella had said during her last visit, speaking through the intercom to avoid entering the room. "I'm trying to understand. The best minds in the galaxy are working to help you." But the best minds in the galaxy had declared Pearl's condition impossible. And what was impossible was obviously a delusion. The conclusion was foregone. The child was broken in ways that reflected poorly on the Valtheri bloodline. The most convenient solution was to keep her hidden, medicated, and silent in the shadows. 3 levels down in the staff preparation area, the atmosphere was different. Here, medical orderlies organized supplies and prepared treatment rooms. Among them was Silas Vexthar cleaning instruments with meticulous care. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, each motion economical and precise. He was 38 years old, human, and completely unremarkable by the standards of the Zenith Institute's diverse staff. Silas's assignment was simple: maintain the cleanliness and organization of medical supplies, prepare rooms for procedures, and assist with patient transport. He performed these duties with a quiet competence that made him invisible to most of the staff. Humans were common enough on Chrysolith 9, integrated into the workforce centuries ago, but they rarely held positions of authority. His uniform was standard medical gray, worn but clean, fitting loosely on a frame that had once been more substantial. Silas moved through the corridors with a quality of presence that was difficult to define. He didn't hurry, but he was never late. He didn't speak unnecessarily, but when he did, his words were considered and kind. There was a gentleness to him that wasn't weakness, a quietness that wasn't absence, but rather a deliberate choice to move through the world without adding to its noise. "Vexthar," barked Overseer Thrime Core, a multi-armed creature whose efficiency at inventory management was matched only by his impatience. "The isolation ward needs restocking. Level 13, Room 7. You are authorized for entry." Silas nodded, gathering the necessary supplies onto an anti-gravity cart. Level 13, the restricted level. He had been working at the center for nearly 3 years and had only been called there twice before, both times for emergency deliveries to empty rooms. Everyone whispered about Room 7, the princess's chamber, but no one discussed it openly. He didn't react to the assignment beyond a quiet acknowledgement. Inside, however, something stirred that he thought was long dead, a faint curiosity about another soul experiencing isolation and pain. But Silas had learned to keep such feelings carefully contained. The universe had taught him that caring deeply led only to unbearable loss. The elevator to level 13 required 3 separate security clearances. Silas placed his hand on the biometric scanner and allowed the retinal scan, descending through the heart of the massive structure until he reached depths most staff would never see. When the doors opened, the difference was immediate. The bright, welcoming aesthetics of the main center were absent here. The walls were darker, the lighting dimmer, and the air itself seemed heavier, weighted with secrets and suffering. 2 guards stood outside room 7, both Valtheri, radiating the aggressive readiness their military training had instilled. They watched Silas approach with the casual disdain armed beings often showed toward unarmed service workers. "Delivery," Silas said simply. The lead guard scanned his credentials and nodded toward the door. "You have 10 minutes. Do not interact with the patient. Do not speak to the patient. Complete your restocking and exit immediately." Silas inclined his head in understanding. The door dilated open with a sound like tearing silk, revealing the chamber beyond. And that was when he heard it. Not a scream, though he had been warned about the screaming. What he heard was a small, broken sob, the sound of suffering so profound and resigned that it bypassed his careful emotional defenses and struck directly at the core of his heart. He stepped into the room, his anti-gravity cart floating silently beside him, and saw her for the first time. Pearl Valtheri Nithya hung suspended in the middle of the chamber, her small body curled into a defensive position that spoke of years spent trying to make herself smaller, trying to present less surface area to a pain that came from everywhere at once. Silas stopped moving. He didn't approach. He didn't speak. He simply stood there, 30 meters away, looking at this small being who was clearly in agony. And in that moment of stillness, something inside him recognized something inside her. 2 souls broken by the universe in different ways, but who shared the fundamental understanding that suffering could be invisible. Pearl's sobbing caught in her throat. Her eyes, which had been clenched shut against the sensory assault of the guards and staff, slowly opened. She turned her head, confused by a change she couldn't immediately identify. Someone new had entered her room. Someone new was near her. But something was different. Something was impossible. It didn't hurt. For the first time in her 9 years of conscious memory, another being's presence in her space did not cause pain. The emotional signature she had learned to dread, the assault of feelings, thoughts, and inner turmoil that normally crashed into her consciousness like physical blows, was not there. Instead, there was something she had no reference for. Quietness. Not silence, which was merely the absence of sound, but a profound inner stillness that radiated from this human like warmth from a sun. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice raw from screaming, barely audible even in the chamber's perfect acoustics. Silas had been told not to speak to her, but the genuine wonder in her voice compelled him to answer. "My name is Silas," he said softly. "I am here to restock your medical supplies." "You don't hurt," Pearl said, staring at him with an intensity that made Silas feel simultaneously exposed and recognized. "Why don't you hurt?" The question hung in the air between them. Silas didn't understand exactly what she meant, but he saw how her body had begun to uncurl, how her breathing slowed from panicked gasps to a normal rhythm. "I don't know what you mean," he said honestly. "But I am not here to hurt you." "Everyone hurts," Pearl insisted, her voice growing stronger. "The nurses hurt like broken glass. The doctors hurt like metal scraping my bones. Even my mother hurts so much I can't breathe. But you are quiet." Silas understood then, or began to understand, what the specialists had missed. This child wasn't delusional. She was sensing the emotional states of those around her as physical pain. And she was right. He was quiet. 3 years and 4 months ago, Silas's 7-year-old daughter, Daisy, had died from Varaxian fever. He had held her hand as she slipped away and felt the shattering of every hope he had ever built. In the months that followed, something fundamental had broken inside him. Not his sanity, but his investment in the world's demands for ambition, anger, and competition. The grief had burned away the aggression that fueled most interactions. What remained was a deep quietness, a presence that asked nothing and defended nothing. He didn't know this tragedy had made him unique in the galaxy. He only knew that grief had taught him to let go of everything except the simple intention to cause no harm. "How long have you been in pain?" Silas asked, his voice carrying genuine curiosity. "Always," she answered simply. "For as long as I can remember. The doctors say I'm lying. But it is real." "I believe you," Silas said. And those 3 words accomplished what years of advanced medical intervention had failed to achieve. Pearl began to cry, not from pain this time, but from the overwhelming relief of finally being believed. The 10 minutes allotted for the supply delivery passed. Then 20. Then 30. Inside the observation room, The atmosphere was electric with confusion. The guards stationed outside the door checked their weapon charges, unsure whether to breach the room, but they held back. What? Because the monitoring equipment, for the first time in history, showed Pearl's vital signs stabilizing. Dr. Ishmael Javeth stood frozen before the holographic displays, his insectoid compound eyes twitching rapidly as they processed the impossible data. Pearl's heart rate had dropped from a frantic bird-like flutter to a steady rhythm. Her cortisol levels, usually high enough to kill a grown Valtheri warrior, were bottoming out. Inside the room, Silas had finished restocking the shelves, moving with deliberate slowness. He wasn't just cleaning anymore, he was buying time. He knew that every second he remained in that room was a second the child spent without agony. Pearl had fully uncurled from her suspension field. She wasn't floating in a fetal ball anymore. She was sitting up watching him. Her hands, usually clenched in fists, were relaxed on her lap. "Will you come back?" she asked, her voice small and trembling. Silas paused at the door, his empty cart hovering beside him. He turned to look at her, really look at her. In her violet eyes, he saw the same desperate hope he had once seen in his daughter Daisy's face when the fever first took hold. The look that asks, "Am I going to be okay?" He had lied to Daisy back then. He had told her yes because he couldn't bear to tell her the truth. But he would not lie to Pearl. "I don't know," Silas said honestly. "I go where I am assigned. But I will ask." "Please," she whispered. "You are the only one who doesn't hurt." Silas nodded once, a promise, and stepped through the door. As the heavy blast doors sealed shut with a hiss, the silence was shattered. Immediately, the monitors in the observation room flashed red. Pearl was screaming again. The agony of the guard's aggression and the doctor's cold curiosity crashed back into her consciousness like a physical assault. But for 33 minutes and 12 seconds she had been free. Dr. Ishmael stared at the screen, watching the chaos return. "Run a complete analysis on the human," he commanded Nurse Cyrus. "Full background check, psychological profile, medical history. I want to know what just happened in that room." Cyrus's fingers flew across the interface, her expression sour. "The orderly is Silas Vexthar. Age 38. Human. Employed here for 3 years. Standard background. Unremarkable service record. No disciplinary issues. He is completely average in every measurable way." "Nothing is average about what we just witnessed," Ishmael muttered. The princess exhibited 0 distress responses during his presence. 0. Whatever that human is, he is not average. That evening, after his shift, Silas took the transit rail down to the lower districts of the city. Far from the crystalline spires of the Zenith Institute, the lower levels were a grid of industrial housing blocks where the smog tasted like copper. His apartment was a small, gray box on the 23rd floor, containing only the minimum necessary for survival. He sat on the edge of his sleeping platform, the lights of the city flickering through his single window. On a small shelf sat a physical photograph, preserved in a stasis field, a relic of a bygone era. It was Daisy. She was smiling, a gap-toothed grin captured forever at age 6, 2 months before the Varaxian fever took her. Silas looked at the image as he did every night. "I met someone today," he said to the empty room. "She reminds me of you. She's in pain, Daisy, and no one believes her." The photograph offered no answer, but Silas felt the familiar ache in his chest, the grief that had become his constant companion. "I think I might be able to help her," he whispered. "Is that okay? Can I try to help someone else?" He didn't sleep well that night. He kept seeing Pearl floating in the darkness, screaming at pain that came from everywhere and nowhere. When he woke before dawn, the decision was already made. He wasn't just a janitor anymore. He was a man with a mission. The next morning, during the shift briefing, Silas approached Overseer Thryme Core. The multi-armed supervisor was busy berating a drone mechanic, but he paused when he saw Silas. "I would like to request permanent assignment to the Level 13 supply rotation," Silas said calmly. Core's 4 eyes narrowed. "Level 13? The isolation ward? You understand that is considered a punishment assignment? No one requests the ghost floor." "I understand," Silas replied. "I would still like to request it." "What? What possible motivation could you have for wanting to work in the most depressing section of the entire institute?" "The patient in room 7 needs consistency," Silas said, his voice steady. "I can provide that." Core studied him, looking for an angle, a hidden agenda. But Silas's record was spotless. And frankly, finding anyone willing to endure the creepy atmosphere of Level 13 was a headache. "Approved," Core grunted. You handle all level 13 duties effective immediately. Just don't make me regret this. That afternoon, Silas returned to room 7. He had requisitioned supplies that didn't strictly need restocking. Extra bandages, diagnostic fluids, anything to justify his presence. The guards scanned him and let him pass. They had seen the data too. The standing orders had been modified to allow the calming orderly access. When the door opened, Pearl was in the middle of an episode, her body rigid, a scream tearing from her throat. But the moment Silas crossed the threshold, before the door even closed, she stopped. Instantly. She turned toward him, tears still streaming down her face, but her expression transformed into pure, uncomplicated joy. "You came back?" she gasped. "You really came back." "I said I would try," Silas said gently. "I'm assigned to your rotation now. I will be here every day. Every day." Pearl repeated the words as if they were a magic spell. 5 days of not hurting. I didn't know that was possible. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Silas would arrive, and for the duration of his shift, Pearl would be free. He worked slowly, inventing tasks to stay longer. And while he worked, they talked. "What do you like to do?" Silas asked one day. "When the pain stops, what brings you happiness?" Pearl looked confused. "I don't know. I've never had moments of peace. Not until you." The statement hit Silas hard. 9 years old, and she had never known peace until a janitor walked into her room. "Then we will discover what you like together," Silas said. "Would you like me to tell you about where my people come from? About old Earth?" "Yes," Pearl said, her eyes wide. "Tell me everything." So Silas told her stories. He told her about oceans that covered 70% of a planet, about mountains capped with frozen water called snow, and forests where trees grew for hundreds of years. He described sunsets that painted the sky in colors without names. Pearl listened with a starvation for connection, drinking in his words like water. But outside room 7, the miracle was becoming a problem. The medical staff watched the monitors with a mixture of fascination and jealousy. Dr. Ishmael had begun running tests on Silas, scanning his brain before and after his shifts. "Your brain activity is unusual," Ishmael explained one morning, showing Silas a colorful neural map. "Where most beings display constant fluctuations, stress, ambition, fear, your readings are flat. Meditative. You operate at an emotional frequency that is practically invisible." "What does that mean?" Silas asked. "It means you don't broadcast," Ishmael said, clicking his mandibles. "The princess is hypersensitive to emotional noise. We all emit it. But you are silent. How did you achieve this state? Is it training?" Silas hesitated. "No," he said quietly. "Grief taught me. When you lose everything that matters, you learn to let go of everything that doesn't. You have experienced significant loss." "My daughter," Silas said. 3 years ago." Ishmael looked at the human with a new emotion, respect. "I see. The Varaxian fever. We lost 12,000 in that outbreak. I am sorry." Inside room 7, the bond deepened. Pearl began to explain her world to Silas. She told him that anger felt like being hit with a hammer. Fear felt like drowning in ice water. Sadness was a heavy weight, like gravity increasing tenfold. "And me?" Silas asked one day. "What do I feel like?" Pearl thought for a moment. "You feel like safety," she said. "Like the quiet after a storm. You feel like a soft blanket." Safe. The word hung between them. It was something Silas hadn't been able to give Daisy in the end, but he could give it to Pearl. However, not everyone was charmed by the janitor and the princess. Nurse Cyrus was the loudest critic. "The human and the crazy girl," she sneered in the staff lounge, loud enough for Silas to hear. "What a perfect pair. The delusional child and the grieving father playing pretend." Rumors began to spread. People whispered that Silas was taking advantage of a vulnerable patient, that his attachment was unhealthy. It wasn't long before Overseer Core called him into the office. "Sullivan, or vexed or whatever," Core sighed, rubbing two of his foreheads. "I'm hearing complaints. They say you stay too long. They say you talk too much." "Is the patient complaining?" Silas asked. "No. Her vitals improve when you are there." "You are currently the only thing that works," Core admitted. "But people are talking. Watch yourself. Do not give them a reason to fire you." He looked at the screens, then at Dr. Ishmael. "This has gone on long enough," Dr. Asher declared, his voice dripping with arrogance. "The child requires aggressive restructuring. This empathy theory is pseudoscientific nonsense. We are going to map her neural pathways and burn out the defect." But the human orderly, Ishmael began. The orderly is a distraction, Dr. Asher snapped. We will proceed with the procedure tomorrow. The Queen demands results, not fairy tales about a janitor who cures pain with kindness. Silas didn't know it yet, but the safe haven he had built for Pearl was about to be stormed. The peace was over. The correction was beginning. The next morning, inside room 7, Pearl was experiencing one of her better days. Silas had just arrived for his shift, and for the first time in weeks, Pearl's face held a glimmer of genuine brightness. I had a dream, she said, her voice animated with a wonder Silas had never heard before. Not a nightmare. A real dream. I was flying, Silas. Not in a ship, but actually flying like I had wings made of light. And below me was a garden, colors I've never seen, flowers that hummed like music. You were there walking through it. You looked up and smiled at me and I knew I was safe. Silas smiled, pausing in his inventory check. That sounds beautiful, Pearl. It sounds like hope. It was the first time I didn't wake up screaming, she whispered. Do you think it means I'm getting better? Before Silas could answer, the heavy blast door dilated open without warning. The sound was harsh, like a mechanical tear in the fabric of their peace. Dr. Asher Krelvach strode into the room, his cape billowing with self-importance. Behind him trailed Dr. Ishmael and 2 technicians pushing a heavy, ominous-looking cart filled with neural modification equipment. Pearl's scream was immediate and piercing. To her, Dr. Asher wasn't just a person. He was a walking catastrophe. His emotional signature was unlike anything she had ever encountered. A blazing inferno of arrogance, aggressive certainty, and cold ambition that crashed into her consciousness like a physical assault. It felt like being burned alive. Stop that nonsense, Asher commanded, his voice sharp with authority. You are going to submit to treatment immediately. This charade has continued long enough. Pearl couldn't stop. The pain was so intense that the suspension field began to fluctuate, unable to compensate for the violent trembling of her small body. She curled into herself, hands clawing at her ears, trying to block out a noise that wasn't sound. Silas moved instinctively. He didn't think, he just acted. He stepped between the doctor and the princess, his body language calm but his positioning deliberately protective. She cannot submit to anything right now, Silas said, his voice low and steady. She is in too much pain. Pain that exists only in her imagination, Asher snapped, not even looking at the orderly. Move aside, janitor. This does not concern you. I will not move aside, Silas replied. He didn't raise his voice, but the steel in his tone made the technicians pause. She has not consented to treatment. She is clearly in distress. Whatever you are planning should be postponed until she is stable. Dr. Asher's face flushed a deep violet, a sign of Valtheri rage. To Pearl, this shift in emotion felt like gasoline being thrown on the fire. Her screams intensified, turning into ragged, tearing sounds that echoed off the cold walls. You dare obstruct a licensed physician of the Dominion? Asher hissed. I could have you arrested for interference with patient care. I could have you exiled to the mining colonies. Then arrest me, Silas said, meeting the doctor's furious gaze. But you are not touching her without her informed consent. And right now, she can't hear you over the agony you are causing her. Dr. Ishmael stepped forward, his mandibles clicking nervously. Dr. Asher, perhaps we should consider the orderly's point. The princess does appear to be in genuine crisis. If we wait until she stabilizes. I am not waiting for a janitor's permission. Asher roared. The procedure happens now. Restrain the child. Prepare the neural modification array. He gestured to the door. Guards, remove this obstruction. Use force if necessary. The 2 royal guards entered the room. They were trained warriors, radiating aggressive readiness. To Pearl, their entry was the final blow. It added 2 more sources of jagged, violent emotional energy to the room. The sensory overload was total. She wasn't just screaming anymore, she was convulsing. Her small body seized up, racked with spasms as her nervous system overloaded. Silas didn't fight the guards. He wasn't a soldier and he wasn't violent. But he did the one thing no one else in the room was doing, he spoke the truth. Look at her. Silas shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Actually look at what your presence is doing to her. Every one of you is hurting her right now. I am the only person in this room who isn't causing her pain, and you want to remove me to force a drill into her skull? What kind of healers are you? Dr. Ishmael looked at Pearl's convulsing form. Then he looked at the monitors. Stop, Ishmael said. His voice was quiet at first, then louder. Everyone stop. Clear the room now. I have authority here, Asher shouted. And I have responsibility for this patient's life. Ishmael countered, pointing a trembling claw at the screens. Look at the data, you fool. Her cortisol levels just spiked 300%. Her heart rate is approaching cardiac arrest. Her neural activity shows patterns consistent with a massive seizure. If we proceed now, we won't cure her. We will kill her. The words penetrated Dr. Asher's arrogance just enough. He glanced at the monitors. The red lines were peaking, flatlining, spiking again. The data was undeniable. Pearl Valtheri Nithya was dying and they were killing her. Fine, Asher growled, smoothing his cape. We evacuate and allow her to stabilize. But I am reporting this obstruction to the High Council. You, he pointed a finger at Silas, will be finished. The room cleared. The technicians, the guards, and the doctors withdrew to the observation deck. The moment the door sealed, the change was instantaneous. Pearl's convulsions slowed. Her screaming faded into broken, gasping sobs. Her heart rate began the long, slow climb down from the edge of death. And through it all, Silas stood beside her suspension field. He didn't touch her. He knew she was too sensitive right now, but he stayed close, radiating that strange, sad quietness that was her only shelter. You are safe, he said softly over and over. They're gone. You are safe. They wanted to hurt me, Pearl gasped, her voice barely a whisper. They wanted to go into my brain and make me not feel any more. I know, Silas said. I didn't let them. I won't let them. But he said, he would arrest you, she cried, looking at him with terrified eyes. He has the power, Silas. He might, Silas admitted. But that doesn't change what is right. You deserve to be protected. And today that was my job. In the observation room, Dr. Ishmael turned on Dr. Asher with uncharacteristic fury. Did you see that? The moment we left, she improved. The moment the human was alone with her, she recovered. That is not delusion, Asher. That is objective, measurable, repeatable data. It is coincidence. Asher insisted, though he looked shaken. It has to be. It has been happening every day for 6 weeks, Ishmael argued. At what point does coincidence become evidence? It doesn't matter, Asher said coldly, regaining his composure. The orderly will be disciplined. I will personally ensure he is arrested for insubordination. And the procedure will be rescheduled. The Queen wants a fix, not a pet human for her broken daughter. You will need Director Prime Estella's approval for forced treatment if the patient's life is at risk, Ishmael reminded him. Then I will speak to Estella directly, Asher declared. This ends now. Both physicians stormed off to file their reports, Dr. Asher demanding Silas's immediate arrest, and Dr. Ishmael submitting a frantic analysis of the incident, pleading for Silas's protection. Inside room 7 the time had run out. The guards returned not to attack but to escort Silas away. The order had come down. He was to be detained pending an investigation. What will happen to you? Pearl asked, tears tracking through the dust on her cheeks. Will I see you tomorrow? I don't know, Silas said, kneeling so he was eye level with her. But listen to me, Pearl. Whatever happens, remember today. Remember that you were not alone. Remember that someone fought for you. You are real. Your pain is real. Hold on to that. She reached out a trembling hand. Silas hesitated, then gently took it. For the first time she didn't flinch. His hand was warm, calloused, and safe. Thank you, she whispered. Silas squeezed her hand, then stood up and walked out with the guards, leaving Pearl alone in the silence. But it was a different kind of silence now. It wasn't empty. It was filled with the memory that she was worth saving. The reports reached the Director Prime's desk within the hour. But along with the text, Dr. Ishmael had attached the security footage of the confrontation. And for the first time in months, Estella Valtheri Kale sat in her high tower and watched her daughter. She didn't read the medical summaries. She watched the video. She saw the arrogant intrusion of Dr. Asher. She saw her daughter's body seizing in agony. And she saw a gray-haired human janitor stand between the might of the Dominion and a frightened child, risking everything to keep her safe. What she saw on that screen would set the stage for a trial that would shake the foundations of Chrysalith 9. The janitor was in chains, the doctor was demanding blood, and the Queen was finally watching. The Hall of Celestial Judgment occupied the highest spire of the capital city, a space designed to make anyone standing in it feel incredibly small. The walls were made of transparent aluminum, offering a terrifying 360-degree view of the violet storm clouds churning in the stratosphere below. At the center of the room sat the High Council, 17 beings representing the major powers of the Valtheri Dominion, their seats arranged in a semicircle of judgment. And in the center of that circle stood Silas Vexthar. He had been stripped of his medical uniform and dressed in the plain gray jumpsuit of a prisoner. He had been detained for 3 days in a holding cell, isolated and silent. He hadn't been allowed to see Pearl, and the knowledge that she was alone, likely screaming in agony without him, weighed heavier on his heart than the chains binding his wrists. To his left stood Dr. Asher Krelvox, looking triumphant and polished. To his right stood Dr. Ishmael Javeth, who looked terrified but had requested permission to speak on the prisoner's behalf. And above them all, elevated on a throne of crystalline light, sat Director Prime Estella Valtheri Kale. Silas had never seen the ruler of Chrysalith 9 in person before. She was magnificent in a terrifying way. Her lavender skin glowed with the bioluminescence of high royalty, and her silver hair flowed like liquid metal. She wore a crown that wasn't just jewelry, it was a piece of organic technology, pulsing with data streams that connected her mind directly to the Dominion's defense grid. Looking at her, Silas finally understood why Pearl couldn't bear to be near her mother. Even from this distance, Estella's emotional signature felt sharp, heavy, and cold. She was a woman who had buried her heart under layers of calculation and necessity. She radiated power, and power Silas realized was loud. Orderly Silas Vexthar, the Director Prime's voice resonated through the chamber, amplified by the acoustics. You stand accused of obstruction of critical medical care, insubordination against a ranking physician, and endangering the life of a royal heir. How do you answer these charges? Silas met her gaze. He didn't bow. He didn't tremble. He was a man who had lost his child. He had nothing left to fear from the living. Guilty, Silas said calmly. A murmur rippled through the council. They expected begging. They expected excuses. Guilty of protecting a child from forced treatment she did not consent to, Silas continued, his voice steady. Guilty of shielding her from pain when her own doctors would not. If compassion is a crime in the Dominion, then I accept the punishment. Dr. Asher stepped forward, sensing a threat in the human's dignity. Your Excellence, this human demonstrates the exact arrogance I reported. He believes his uneducated opinion outweighs the expertise of the Institute's top specialists. He has formed an inappropriate, obsessive attachment to the princess. He is dangerous. Is this true, Orderly? Estella asked, leaning forward. Have you formed an inappropriate attachment to my daughter? I have formed a friendship with a lonely child who has been tortured by your medical system for 7 years, Silas replied. If inappropriate means treating her like a person instead of a broken machine, then yes. I am guilty of that too. Before the Director Prime could respond to this insolence, Dr. Ishmael stepped forward. Director Prime, I request permission to present evidence that changes the context of these events entirely. Estella signaled her assent with a wave of her hand. Ishmael tapped his data pad, and a massive holographic display filled the air above the judgment circle. It showed 2 brain scans side by side. For 7 years, Ishmael began, his voice shaking slightly, we believed Princess Pearl suffered from delusion. We thought she was imagining the pain. We were wrong. He pointed to the first scan, which was a chaos of red and angry orange colors. This is the princess's neural activity when Dr. Asher is in the room. Her brain isn't imagining pain, it is processing an external assault. She has evolved, Director Prime. Her neural architecture includes structures we have never seen before, structures that allow her to perceive bioelectric emotional signatures. She feels emotions the way we feel heat or cold. The council members leaned in, whispering. Dr. Asher scoffed loudly. This is ridiculous. Emotions are chemical reactions, not broadcast signals. It was impossible, Ishmael corrected, until Pearl. She is not defective. She is a leap forward in consciousness. She feels the truth of everyone around her. He gestured to the second scan. This one was blue, calm, and orderly. And this, Ishmael said looking at Silas, is her brain when Orderly Silas Vexthar is present. The difference is objective. It is measurable. Estella stared at the blue scan. Why? She asked. What is different about the human? We ran a full psychological profile, Ishmael explained. Most beings emit a constant noise of ambition, fear, judgment, and desire. It is a chaotic frequency. But Silas is quiet. His baseline emotional state is profound stillness. He does not broadcast the noise that hurts her. Estella turned her gaze back to Silas. How? She demanded, and for the first time, her voice wasn't a command but a question. How did you achieve this state? Are you a monk? A telepath? Silas took a breath. No, Your Excellence. I am a father. The room went silent. 3 years ago my daughter Daisy died, Silas said, the name tasting like dust in his mouth. She was 7. When she died, the part of me that wanted things, the part that competed, that judged, that fought for status, it died with her. I learned that when you lose the most important thing in the world, nothing else matters enough to get angry about. The grief burned away the noise. All that was left was the wish to cause no harm. He looked up at the powerful woman on the throne. You are asking how I became quiet. I became quiet because I was broken. And in that silence, your daughter found a place to rest. Estella sat frozen. The implication hung heavy in the air. If the human was safe because he was gentle, then the mother was painful because she was... What? I want to see it, Estella said suddenly, standing up. If my daughter can truly perceive these things, let her prove it. We will go to level 13. Director Prime, Dr. Asher protested. Bringing the entire council to the isolation ward is unnecessary and... Silence. Estella commanded. We go now. 20 minutes later, the most powerful beings in the Valtheri Dominion stood in the observation deck outside room 7. They watched through the glass as Pearl curled into a ball, sobbing. The sheer emotional weight of the council, 17 ambitious, ruthless politicians, was crushing her from 30 meters away. This is what you wanted to force treatment on, Silas said quietly. He was still in chains, flanked by guards. Look at her. This is what your power feels like to her. Estella pressed her hand against the glass. I have visited her dozens of times, she whispered. She always screamed. I thought she hated me. She doesn't hate you, Silas said. She loves you. But your presence hurts her. The crown, the responsibility, the ruthlessness you need to rule. To her, it feels like you're holding a knife. Dr. Ishmael activated the intercom. Princess, he said gently. The Director Prime wishes for a demonstration. Can you tell us what you feel right now? From the people in this room? Pearl's voice came through the speakers, thin and trembling. I can do it, just please make them step back. It burns. Estella gestured, and the council members stepped back from the glass. The tall one, Pearl whispered, with the blue scales. The senator from the southern sector. One of the council members stiffened. He is terrified, Pearl said. He is hiding stolen credits. He is afraid the audit will find them tomorrow. It feels like cold slime in my chest. The senator gasped, looking around in panic. The other council members stared at him. It was a secret known only to him, yet the child knew. The one with the golden eyes, Pearl continued. She is angry. She hates the Director Prime. She has a weapon hidden in her boot right now. It feels like a hot needle. The guards immediately seized the council member with golden eyes. They searched her boot and pulled out a monofilament dagger. The room erupted in chaos. Enough, Estella said, her voice shaking. I believe you. She turned to the intercom. And me, Pearl? What do you feel from me? There was a long silence from the room. Then Pearl spoke the truth that had been breaking her heart for years. You love me, Pearl said softly. I know you do. But your love is buried under a mountain. You carry the weight of 17 star systems, Mother. You calculate every word, every move. You are hard because you have to be. But when you come near me, that hardness crushes me. I can't breathe. I can't exist. Estella closed her eyes. Tears, rare and shocking, slid down her face. I didn't know, she whispered. My heart, I didn't know. And him? Estella asked, pointing at Silas. What do you feel from the human? Peace, Pearl answered instantly. He feels like the ocean after the storm is gone. He has no armor, Mother. He has let go of everything that hurts. He is the only place in the world where I can rest. The Director Prime turned to Dr. Asher. The arrogance was gone from the doctor's face, replaced by the realization that his career was over. Release him, Estella commanded the guards holding Silas. Release him immediately. She looked at Silas, stripping away the layers of royalty until she was just a mother looking at the man who had saved her child. You said grief taught you this, Estella said. You said you learned to be gentle because you had no other choice. Yes, Silas answered, rubbing his wrists where the chains had been. Teach me, Estella said. The request stunned the room. The Director Prime of the Valtheri Dominion did not ask for lessons from janitors. Teach me how to be quiet, she pleaded. Teach me how to be near her without hurting her. I will not have my daughter scream when I enter the room. I will not be the cause of her pain anymore. Silas looked at her. He saw the desperation. He saw the love trying to break through the concrete of her duty. "I can try," Silas said gently. "But it will cost you, Director Prime." "Cost me what? Credits? Planets? Name it." "No," Silas shook his head. "It will cost you your armor. You will have to learn to put down the weight of the world. You will have to stop being a ruler and start being a person. And that is the hardest thing you will ever do." Estella looked through the glass at her daughter, who was watching them with wide, hopeful eyes. For the first time in her reign, the Director Prime made a decision that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with love. "I will pay it," Estella vowed. "Whatever it takes." She turned to Dr. Asher. "Get out of my sight. If you ever come near this level again, I will exile you to the void." Asher fled. Estella turned back to Silas. "When do we begin?" "Now," Silas said. "First, take off the crown." Estella hesitated. Her hands went to the organic circuitry pulsing at her temples. She hadn't removed it in public in 20 years. It was her connection to the fleet, to the economy, to the power she wielded. To remove it was to be naked. But she looked at Pearl. And slowly, with trembling hands, she disconnected the interface. The lights on the crown died. She lifted it from her head and placed it on the console. "Good," Silas said softly. "Now, just breathe." And in the observation room of Level 13, the revolution began. Not with a blaster shot or a political decree, but with a queen learning how to breathe, guided by a janitor who had walked through hell and come back with the secret of peace. The days that followed the trial were not filled with magical instant fixes. Transformation, as Silas knew better than anyone, is not a lightning strike. It is a slow, grinding erosion of the old self to make way for the new. Director Prime Estella Valtheri Kale stood outside Room 7 for the first time in 3 months without her crown. Her hands, usually steady enough to sign death warrants for entire planets, were trembling. Inside that room her daughter waited. And beside Estella stood Silas, the former janitor who was now the most important advisor in the Dominion. "What if I can't do it?" Estella asked quietly, her voice stripped of its imperial echo. "What if I have carried this weight for so long that I've forgotten how to set it down?" "Then we try again tomorrow," Silas replied with the infinite patience that had become his superpower. "And the day after that. Until the weight becomes a little lighter. Transformation is just 10,000 small choices to be different than you were yesterday." For the next hour, Silas guided the most powerful woman in the galaxy through the basics of breathing. He taught her to notice when her mind jumped to calculation, trade routes, military deployments, political leverage, and how to gently release those thoughts like letting go of a helium balloon. Inside the room, Pearl watched through the glass. She could feel the change. It wasn't perfect. Her mother's presence still felt heavy, like a humid day before a thunderstorm, but the razor-sharp edges were dulling. There were gaps in the noise now, tiny windows of silence where Pearl could breathe. "I can feel her trying," Pearl whispered to Dr. Ishmael. "It still hurts, but I can bear it." When the session ended, Estella slumped against the wall, exhausted. "That was harder than negotiating the Proxima Treaty," she admitted, wiping sweat from her lavender brow. "How long?" she asked Silas. "How long did it take you to get this quiet?" Silas looked at his hands, remembering the empty apartment and the silence that had almost swallowed him. 18 months before I could function," he said. 2 years before I could work without crying. 3 years before I realized the anger was gone. There is no shortcut, Director Prime. You have to walk every step of the road." Estella looked at her crown, sitting cold and dormant on a nearby table. "I cannot set aside the Empire for 3 years. The Dominion requires attention." "Then you must share the burden," Silas said. "And you must decide what matters more, ruling with ruthless efficiency, or holding your daughter's hand." It was the choice that would define an era. And Estella made it. "I choose my daughter," she said. "Whatever the price." In the weeks that followed, Estella issued the transformation edicts. She mandated that all high-ranking officials, military commanders, corporate CEOs, government ministers, undergo emotional resonance training. The logic was simple. If your emotional noise is too loud to be around a child, you are too unstable to lead a star system. The backlash was immediate. Generals argued that gentleness would make their armies weak. Corporations claimed that removing competitive drive would crash the economy. They called Estella mad. They called Silas a witch doctor. But they couldn't argue with the results. Silas became the first instructor at the newly formed Institute for Conscious Leadership. He didn't teach strategy or economics. He taught generals how to sit still. He taught CEOs how to feel their own heartbeats without panicking. He brought them to level 13. He made them stand outside Pearl's room and watch the monitors. Look at the screen, Silas would say to a room full of skeptical warlords. Right now your aggression is causing that child's heart rate to spike. You think you are strong? Your strength is hurting an innocent girl. Now close your eyes. Breathe. Let it go. And as they breathed, as they dropped their armor, they saw the red lines on the monitor turn blue. They saw the proof that their internal state had external consequences. It changed them. Slowly, begrudgingly, the leaders of the Dominion began to understand that true power wasn't about dominance. It was about control over oneself. But the old world didn't go down without a fight. 15 months into the transformation, a group calling themselves the Preservation Alliance, hardline military traditionalists, launched a coup. They surrounded the royal palace with tanks, demanding Estella's abdication. Estella didn't order her guards to fire. Instead, she walked out of the palace gates. Beside her walked Silas, unarmed. And in front of them walked Pearl. She was 10 years old now, stronger, able to navigate the world thanks to the new quiet culture her mother was building. She stood before the tanks, her voice amplified across the city. I can feel you, Pearl said, her voice ringing clear. I can feel your fear masquerading as strength. I can feel how much you are hurting inside and how you think hurting me will fix it. The soldiers in the tanks hesitated. They were used to fighting enemies who shot back. They weren't used to an enemy who told them exactly how they felt. You don't have to do this, Pearl continued. You can choose to put the anger down. You can see what remains when the noise stops. One by one the hatches opened. Soldiers climbed out, lowering their weapons. Some of them were weeping, broken open by the sheer truth of the moment. The coup didn't fail because of superior firepower. It failed because you cannot fight someone who understands you better than you understand yourself. 3 years later. The sun was setting over the capital of Chrysalith 9, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold. In the palace gardens, a sanctuary designed specifically for emotional silence, Silas sat on a stone bench. He looked older now. The gray in his hair had turned to white, but his eyes were clear. Beside him sat Pearl, now 12 years old. She wasn't the curled-up, screaming child in the glass cage anymore. She was a young woman who helped draft laws to protect the sensitive. Do you think Daisy would be proud? Pearl asked, watching the first stars appear. Silas smiled, a genuine, soft expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. I think she would be proud that I kept going, he said. I think she would be proud that I didn't let the sadness turn me into stone. And I think she would be very happy that I found you. I wish I could have met her, Pearl said. She sounds brave. She was, Silas agreed. She was curious and kind, just like you. Director Prime Estella joined them, walking through the twilight. She moved differently now, slower, more deliberate. She sat on the bench next to Pearl, close enough to touch. Pearl looked at her mother's hand resting on the stone. Carefully, deliberately, Pearl reached out and covered Estella's hand with her own. Estella froze, then let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for a decade. The contact still caused Pearl a hum of discomfort. The weight of leadership never fully vanished, but it was bearable. It was a friction she could endure for the sake of love. Thank you, Estella whispered to her daughter. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for changing, Pearl replied. Thank you for choosing me. Silas watched them, the mother and the daughter, reunited by the hard work of healing. He looked up at the stars, at the infinite dark ocean above them. He thought about the journey, from the sterile deathbed of his own daughter to this garden on an alien world. He closed his eyes and sent a thought out into the universe, a message to the ghost that had guided him here. I did what you asked, Daisy, he thought. I didn't stay sad forever. I learned to carry you with love instead of pain. I learned that the worst thing that ever happened to me could be the foundation for something good. Thank you for teaching me how to be gentle. Thank you for the 7 years we had. I carry you in every lesson I teach, in every moment of silence I create. I hope, wherever you are proud of what we built. In a galaxy obsessed with power, arrogance, and noise, a simple human janitor had proven something revolutionary. He proved that the greatest strength isn't the ability to crush your enemies. The greatest strength is the courage to be gentle enough to heal them. The revolution wasn't won with blasters. It was won with a breath. And it started with one man who decided that just because his world had ended, he didn't have to let the rest of the world burn. Thank you so much for watching this incredible journey of transformation. If you enjoyed this story of how gentleness became a superpower and one man's grief taught a galaxy how to love better, please do me a huge favor. Smash that like button, share this video with a friend who needs a little hope, and subscribe to the channel. We are building something special here and I want you to be a part of it. Make sure to check out the playlist on your screen right now for more amazing stories that will touch your heart and expand your mind. And I have a question for you. Do you think you could learn the kind of quietness Silas had? Let me know in the comments below. I read all of them. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and remember, your story isn't over yet. Good wishes to you all.